he's getting progressive pain on the acetabulum.
Was the pain in his hip right here,
Yeah,
or
right.
in the
More up here.
Okay.
Yeah, and into his buttock too.
Okay.
So we were a little worried about his back as well.
And if you look the soft tissue density, it's kind of weird right there. Maybe a pseudo tumor, something like that.
Nice, good thought. I thought the same thing. So,
No.
so I thought the same thing. But what I didn't appreciate, and I wanted to show this because this existed in the bone loss that I showed in the one knee, where I took the components off. There was no bone in the periarticular region. I thought the bone looked reasonable on his acetabular side, but we then went and did this CT scan. And look at the bone on the acetabular side. He had a little crack there in the bone, and there's nothing. There were about 3 spicules of bone holding that cut in place. I don't, it really was remarkable. And you're absolutely right, Esteban, that there's a huge soft tissue mass around there. So I did, of course, an infection workup. I did an ESR, I did a CRP. Even though those were normal, just because of the complexity of this case, I sent for an aspirate. I don't routinely do that if the other levels are normal. So, surgical options.
Uy, una pregunta. En tu hospital, ¿quién hace la punción? Who's the one who performs the joint punction? You or some X-ray guy or something like that?
We send, all our aspirations are done under imaging. So we send them to, I try and send them to one guy, one specific radiologist, because it's so technique dependent, as you know. And one of my colleagues, we have one of those ultrasound machines. So John Cooper, you'll see his name up in places. John's done a lot of work, but he is very facile with the ultrasound, and he'll do it himself in the office. He says he can easily ultrasound. He lays him flat, puts the ultrasound probe here, and puts a needle into the hip joint. I'm just not that good. I also fear a little bit the sterile technique, and if you introduce infection into a hip, that's a big deal. Patients don't like to sit still having a long needle placed in them. I mean, I think it's a little painful. What do you do?
Myself.
You do it yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
But with ultrasound.
Yes, yeah, so you're
Maybe
good at it.
I ask someone, but I am the one who makes the aspiration.
Yeah.
In Colombia,
Do it yourself.
con eco.
En sala de cirugía, the operating room, under clean condition, and all the procedures that are made by ourselves. We almost never use a radiologist or an echographist to perform the aspiration. And actually at this time, some of us are familiarized with the sonography. So some of us perform the aspiration, the joint aspiration, under sonography vision.
It's funny, I would think that the guys who do anterior hip approaches might be better using the anatomy, because that anterior approach better than we do. The posterior approach guys. So I was very reticent about operating on this guy. He had one of the world experts do his last revision and put that cup in there, and he told them there wasn't much more they could do. But what had changed was he looked at me and said, I can no longer walk on this. It's too painful. So he was on crutches. And as I showed you, he was 69. When you're thin and otherwise healthy in New York at 69, that means your life expectancy is 30 years. So I was forced to do something. here was what we did. We used that CT scan. We sent it to Zimmer Biomet. They told us, you know, it's good enough quality. We can use this for 3D reconstruction. And they sent us a model. You can see the model on the left. They sent me the model and said, you know, what do you think? And I looked at the model because my thought was, you know, I've trained at Mayo. Cupcake should be good for this. But they have the option, and it's remarkably not nearly as expensive as many of the other things we use. You know, one little cone in New York costs $5,000, right? This costs $12,000. So they put all their engineers together, develop a custom tri-flange, and they only charge me twice what they charge me for an off-the-shelf little piece of metal. So this was the option we chose. Let me see if I can. I'm just going to see if I can jump to it because I've also got the.
Doctor Saúl, mandar una construcción de una tri-flange en Colombia, how much?
$4,000.
Me?
$4,000 in Colombia. Maybe next time you should send your
Sending
to Colombia.
How much does it cost there?
In
12.
12 in the States and 4,000 in Colombia. Good business.
So here's the old cup. I want to show you. I'm going to skip through little bits of it. I got it. It's all on video, so I apologize. Jumps a little bit. So these are all, you can see me taking out all this hematoma. And Esteban, that's what all of that was. It was massive hematoma. He really was bleeding into that area. I took cupfuls of it. My hands were full of this stuff. I'm trying to show you here. I think he shows it here. It was big, big cupfuls of that. And that, when I went through the IT band, that was his proximal femur. I didn't have to do any soft tissue dissection.
For this case, did you use tranexamic basic or?
Yes. Yeah. So you can see the 3 spicules of bone. That's all the hematoma that came out. The remarkable. So we sterilized the model and we bring it into the OR, and it allows you to then compare it as you're going along. So I think this was how hard I wanted to see how well fixed that was. And even though he had a transverse pelvic fracture there, I had to use the expert. No, I didn't. You can see I didn't work very hard. Just those 3 little spicules of bone, I think, maybe 10, were holding it. So after that, you can see the posterior column plate. And the nice thing about the custom tri-flange was they built it around the plate, so I didn't have to take the plate out. So they shifted the flange and rotated it. This part gets boring because all you do is we reduced it with 2 non-locking screws at the top and bottom. What's amazing is they send you a chart with the size and length of each screw. So, you know, for someone not very smart like me, it tells me exactly. That's the anterior flange that we put straight down the pubic ramus, and I'll show you that screw because I think that's a very powerful screw. And we put in the dome screws, and then finished up. So, coming back to this. By the way, this is testing my lousy hospital computer. So here are the management we chose this custom tri-flange. It does have an ingrowth surface on the backside. I think it's a good option. I learned a little bit from some of the guys down at Ortho Carolina. They send you the model, and it always has that third row up top of screws on the iliac region. Those are very difficult to get to. Engineers don't think about the human body, they just think about the bone as a free body diagram. So you can actually get them to cut off the top of the flange. Tom Farron taught me this, and change some of the screws and give you a little more screw, a few more screws on the ischium and the one anterior. So it's a truly an interactive thing. So here's what we did, and you can see this screw down the pubic ramus anteriorly. I think those inferior screws are really important here, and they all got good fixation. So I'm going to skip the video because I apologize. This video I don't think will run on this presentation. I've already tried it. But this, he came walking into my office at 3 weeks out. And because I had Jim Sloper, one of my colleagues in the OR with me, I sent him a video and he was smiling walking into my office. I was very nervous about it, full weight bearing, but it's well fixed. It's got a long plate across his pelvis.
What is your concern about the huge hematoma? Right?
Okay.
Why did it happen?
So, yeah, very good point. So, why is he getting it? Right? Does he have persistent osteolysis that's creating third body wear? Or is that as a result of all these embolizations they've done? And he had necrosis. I sent it to the pathologist. They said, it's hematoma. I sent it to culture. It grew nothing. I sent it for cell count. It grew nothing. It's a huge dead space. I was on a panel a few years ago with Dr. Mike Reese, very smart guy from California, and we were talking about when I was at Mayo, and this was 15 years ago, but they would say, treat infection, get rid of the infection, get them off antibiotics. Mike had a very different approach. He said, if I'm putting in a big piece of metal, I put them on antibiotics. And every time I'm doing a total femur or a big distal femoral replacement or something like this, I think about that. And so I called my ID doc and I said, I want him on an antibiotic, an oral antibiotic, post-op. And he said, but you never grew anything, what are you going to put him on? I said, choose something that has, that is tolerated, that has a broad profile. So I believe this gentleman's either on doxycycline or Bactrim, Septrim. But your observation is a good one. I don't know the answer.
And for the dead space, do you put something right there, like this collagen mesh or something like that, or nothing?
We did not. We did not. We just irrigated it all out. Literally, I scooped it out with my hands, irrigated it all out, and closed it up. I didn't put a drain. I put a wound vac on.
But it was not an active bleeding.
It was
Not actively. His bone. So I was concerned that they had embolized and killed his, killed the blood supply to his hemipelvis. But the bone was bleeding. But he had no active bleeding from any unusual vessels. And when you put those flanges way up in the pelvis, there are those gluteal vessels that you can get into. So I was concerned about that, but we saw none of that type of active bleeding.
¿Alguna pregunta del auditorio antes de terminar?
So that was it. And if you're interested in some of the stuff, I think Tom Farron's done some nice work. He's a middle author on these, but I think a lot of these were his cases from Ortho Carolina when Mike Taunton was a fellow with him and some of the other guys. But he has some really nice papers describing both the technique as well as the outcomes.
Every time you use a right bench, it's mandatory to use a cemented dual double mobility cut or?
So we did not in this case. They tell you where the socket's going to go, so they put it in the correct abduction and antiversion. And I was ready with all of that. But we put a liner in, and I was afraid of his abductors and everything. I put a liner in there and tested the hip. I left him with a 36 head. But I think dual mobility is probably, if I were on an examination situation, I would say dual mobility.
Haga así con la derecha.
And you're not saving money.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Yep.